Hello, and welcome to AMG Times video tutorial. In this video, I'm going to continue the explanation of the Pay Policies section and introduce you to the Windows Last tab, which is intended for enabling reporting on exceptions. Here, you should check the Report Exceptions box in order to enable reporting of exceptions. In the Consecutive Hours Worked field, enter the minimum number of consecutive hours an employee has to work to be included in the consecutive hours exception report. Then, click the Overtime Hours Worked field to enter the minimum amount of overtime hours one must work in order to be included in the overtime hours exception report. In the Daily Hours Worked Under field, enter the maximum number of hours an employee has to work in one day to be considered as an exception. In the Daily Hours Worked Over field, enter the minimum number of hours worked in one day an employee needs to be considered as an exception. In both cases, the employee will be included in the Daily Hours Exception report. Here, select the Period Hours Worked Under field and enter the minimum number of hours that need to be worked in a pay period in order to not be considered as an exception. Then, in the Period Hours Worked Over field, enter the maximum number of hours worked in a pay period, after which someone will be considered as an exception. In both cases, the employee will be included in the Period Hours Exception report. Besides the above consideration, which relates to all employees disregarding their age, you can also check Report Exceptions for Minors if you want to report exceptions separately for minor employees. Note that you can report exceptions for up to 3 different age groups. First of all, enable the groups. Then, in the Age field, enter the employee's age for each enabled group of minors. In the Daily Max field, enter the maximum amount of daily worked hours for each group of minors. Working more hours than the daily maximum in one day will be considered an exception, and the employee will be included in the Daily Maximum Exception for Minors report. For the Weekly Max field, enter the maximum number of hours each group of minors can work in a week. Working more hours than the weekly maximum amount will be considered as an exception, and the employee will be included in the Weekly Maximum Exception report. In the Last Out Time field, enter the maximum out time for each group of minors. Working past the last out time will be considered as an exception, and the employee will be included in the Last Out Time Exception report for minors. For example, the following configuration of the first group of minors means that employees under the age of 17 should not work more than 4 hours daily, should not work more than 20 hours weekly, and should not finish work any later than 4 p.m. To view the exception reports, you should go to the Standards section and open the Reports wizard. Select the Exceptions report and then select and generate any of the available exception reports. That's all about the parameters that you should configure for reporting exceptions. Thank you for your attention.